Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave. I'm glad to be here with you yet again. I was just scrolling through all of the episodes that are preloaded for the month of November and listening to the intros to when I come on the mic and hit record, and behind the scenes, I don't even know what I'm going to say next. So it's fun for me too. And introducing all these great co-hosts, just playing them for my wife before she went to work today, and she just shaking her head like, what a clown. So anyways, I love doing the show. I love meeting great podcasters and sharing their stories with you. I hope you're enjoying connecting with these amazing co-hosts. If you have a podcast, if you're thinking about being a podcaster, I would love to have you on as a guest co-host on the show, howtopodcast.ca. Let me know. Get on here. Let's have a great conversation and help somebody in the process. Howtopodcast.ca. I look forward to having you right here on the podcast. And to all those listening, doing all the things you're doing today, thank you for making time for us. We're releasing an episode every day in the month of November. Yep, every day. So, and these aren't 5-minute episodes, which I would highly suggest. These are full episodes, including some extra Daily Daves thrown in just for good measure, because, you know, I love you. And I want to give you as much great podcasting inspiration and content to help you with your show as possible. And that's why I love these co-hosts, because you get more insight beyond what I do and how I view the podcasting world. You get to learn from other experts out there in the space. People just like you. And you're like, Dave, I'm not an expert. Yes, you are, because you have a desire to share your voice with the world, and you are the only you. So you're an expert in being you. So accept it. It's not bragging. You've done it. You're you, and no one else can be you. So we need more of you in the world, and we need your podcast. So if that's a little nudge for you today to hit record and let's get this going, that's what you need today. So happy Monday. Go start your podcast. I'm going to talk today about 4 podcasting myths that I want to blow out of the water today. And just because a lot of people say it doesn't mean it's true. So let's go there today. It's 4 podcasting myths completely debunked here on the How to Podcast series. Are you ready? Let's talk about this. So again, even if you hear it said many, many, many times, does not make it a fact. And we know that the internet is only facts, right? So that's true right there. The idea around podcasting is there is so many opinions. There are so many experts. And by no means, even though you've kindly said that you look to this podcast as a source of information, I am not an expert by any means. And I really want you to understand that I don't know what I don't know. But what I do know and what I've experienced helps me to kind of formulate what I bring to the podcast and what I'm trying to build by doing this. And I'm doing this so that you find some form of encouragement. It might not be with every single co-host that comes on. It might not be with every single topic we talk about. But when you go out into the world of podcasting to learn about podcasting, there's a lot of information, some amazing, some not so amazing, right? So you kind of have to go with what works for you. And that's the biggest thing. Just because you hear it here on this podcast doesn't mean that it's going to work for you in your situation. And you need to kind of filter that out. So take what you hear here and use what you can and move on if it doesn't serve you, because it might serve somebody else. Okay. So don't feel like you have to do everything we talk about here. But I want to debunk some myths that I hear in podcasting because I get a lot of confused people reaching out going, Dave, I heard this guru over here tell me to do this, but then I come to your show and you say something different. Who's right? And it's not really about being right. It's about what works for you and getting different perspectives. So here's 4 podcast myths today. I've teased it many times. Let's get in. Number 1, podcasts are just for the tech savvy people in the world. You know, those nerds that know everything about a computer, and when they talk to you about RAM and internet speed and LUFS and all this stuff, your eyes roll back in your head. You're like, what? Are you still talking to me? Because I don't remember. I don't know any of the words you just said. I listened to a podcast about podcasting, and I really was enjoying the show until it got to one point where this white male host stated that the reason why there's not as many women in podcasting is because women aren't tech savvy and men are better at technology than women. And that's when I stopped listening to that show, because the arrogance to think that, as from a male perspective, speaking on behalf of women, which I don't get that women just aren't good with tech. Now, I know some amazing people in the podcast space, friends of the show here on the How to Podcast series, that could talk circles around others about their knowledge of technology and podcasting. And these are super smart people, way above my pay grade. And I look to them. They are my go-to person to learn from. And I don't understand how gender has anything to do with your tech abilities. I don't get the correlation there by any means. So to hear some expert in podcasting talk down, in a sense, to a portion of the audience, I don't get it. And I don't get how these people win awards. I don't get how these people have a fan base of women who support them. And I'm really struggling here with this. I don't understand how people can be painted with such a wide brush. Talking like a podcast host is one thing. Preparing all the equipment and utilizing them is a completely different thing. And this is what leads to a common misconception that podcasts are complicated and that only the tech savvy will survive. While podcasts do require some basic knowledge of technology, anyone with a smartphone or a computer and access to the internet can create a podcast. There's also many user-friendly apps and programs that are out there to help you, more than there's ever been. And with AI on the doorstep to help us as podcasters, there's so many great tools out there that starting a podcast isn't as daunting as it was back in 2005, 2006, all that. You don't have to recreate the internet to start a podcast. And to those that were part of podcasting back then, thank you for creating this space, because I wouldn't be talking to you right now if people back then hadn't figured all this out. It was very difficult back in the early days to do all this. You really had to know your stuff. And that's not a male-female thing. That's just smarts. There are so many now new platforms and things that you can use to do your podcast. You can easily find tutorials. They got YouTube University. You have podcasts about podcasting, like this one. So as long as you're eager to learn, setting up your own podcast isn't as complicated as it used to be. And there's so many great people out there that can help you. And I would love to help you if you ever need help with that. So podcasts are not just for the tech savvy people. Okay? That's a myth. And it's not true. So number 2, podcasts are only for entertainment purposes. It's interesting that this is one of the myths that are out there right now. While it may be true that many podcasts are created with the intention of entertaining listeners, it's also important to note that there's a wide range of podcasts on various topics that are designed for educational purposes, to teach us stuff, to be informative and thought-provoking. In fact, podcasts can be an excellent source of information and learning for listeners. For example, many podcasts focus on business and finances, providing listeners with valuable insights and advice on how to manage their money and investments. There are podcasts about science and technology and politics and current events, history. I love history. There's really no limit to what you can do in a podcast. And entertainment podcasts are great as well. The one thing I find quite interesting is every podcast seems to be focused around identifying your listener's pain point and coming up with something that answers their pain point. For an entertainment-based podcast, there's not really a pain point that we're trying to solve or get somebody to live differently or think differently. But the one thing that entertainment-based podcasts do is give us a distraction. So it might be that your fan podcast about Yoda might be the podcast that gets somebody through their week because they look forward to your thoughts and your fun podcast all around Yoda. Maybe that's the one thing that just gives them joy in a really busy, hectic world and where they hate their job and they hate their commute and life sucks. But your podcast brightens up their week. Entertainment podcasts are great, but they're not the only way to podcast. So podcasts are only for entertainment purposes. It's a myth. Let's kick that one to the curb. Podcasts can be so much more than that. Number 3, creating a podcast is super expensive. Really, like any other content creation, writing a book, doing social media, they all require different levels of quality, right? And you can spend as much money as you want to get to the next level of quality. If cost is primary concern for you in podcasting, then there are many ways to create a podcast without really breaking the bank. There are some basic things. You want to have a minimum standard of quality. If your listeners can't understand what you're saying because you sound like you're underwater, or the sound behind you in the background is so loud that we can't make out the words that you say, then there's some things that we can do to make that better for the sake of our listener. But you can just use your phone, you can use a computer to record your audio, and instead of investing in professional equipment, you don't need to go hire a studio. You don't need to pay X dollars amount per minute to rent out studio space in a professional studio. You don't have to do those things. You don't have to redesign your house, build an addition to your house. You don't have to do any of those things. A big recurring thing I hear through my guest co-hosts is to start with what you have. Really. Start with what you have and grow from there. As your podcast starts to pick up steam and people fall in love with your show and you do your best with what you have, you can always upgrade in the future. And maybe your audience in your community will then support you in that by donating to your show. We're going to be doing like a 5-episode mini-series around getting finances to support your show from your community in different forms, and that's coming up here on the podcast. But creating a podcast really isn't that expensive. You don't have to spend vast amount of money to have a great sounding show. Again, there's tools now that can help you. And podcastforfree.com is one of the websites that I've purchased. I love the name of that website, by the way, podcastforfree.com. And there, it just links back to my How to Podcast right now. But I have a page at the very bottom of my page, my website, with all the free links of all the free tools that I use to help me with my 7 different podcasts. And you're like, well, Dave, they're free tools. Yeah, I have 7 shows. I can't afford 7 times the cost of Descript, 7 times the cost of that, 7 times the cost of this. I can't afford that. So I need these tools to help me create this content. So I'm recording this today on Audacity straight into my computer using a $50 mic from Amazon. That's it. Oh, and a $13, $14 pair of headphones. And a cold cup of coffee. And that's my morning. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to do this podcasting thing. Okay? Keep that in mind. So that's another debunked myth. You do not have to spend a ton of money to do this. There's many different ways. And if you need help with this, reach out. howtopodcast.ca. I can walk you through and give you some suggestions. End of the day, your show, you do what you want to do, and you're not accountable to anybody except yourself. Maybe your audience, mostly to yourself. Okay, number 4, you need a super big audience to make any money in podcasting. Okay. Part of this is true and part of it is not true. Yes, if you have hundreds of thousands of listeners, sponsors would be interested to get in front of them to sell them products. And they'll use you to get to your audience. They really don't care about you, per se. They really care more about your listener. And it's kind of a spray and pray where we'll just, if we get in front of as many people as possible, somebody's apt to buy something. So let's just cast a wide net, give you money, and maybe somebody will respond. There's other ways to raise money for your show and to get sponsors and to make some income for your podcast. Now, we're not talking about like buying a mansion money, maybe buying flowers for your partner. Like for my wife, Jen, she likes flowers. So if you could make a little bit of money like that and put gas in the car or buy a little bit extra groceries this week, take the kids out for ice cream, right? So there's that kind of money that you can make at podcasting. Cover your cost for your hosting site or a subscription, your SpeakPipe, whatever. There's ways to do that. So the idea, though, that you can make money, you can still make money even if you have a small audience. Many podcasters believe that they have to have this huge, large number of listeners before they can even start making money for their show. It's true that a larger audience is going to give you more opportunities than a small audience. It's important to note that there are many ways to monetize your podcast, regardless on the audience size. If you have a large audience, you may be able to attract these big sponsors and deals and brands that are looking to get in front of your audience. The one thing you got to think about, even if you do have a large audience, there's a chance you might not make money through sponsorships because what the sponsor wants is for your audience to buy the thing, subscribe to the thing, purchase the thing. And if you put out commercials for a sponsor and no one in your audience responds and they get no return on their investment in your show, that ROI thing, they might not re-sign with you. So even just having a big audience doesn't guarantee that you're going to have ongoing financial support from a sponsor. Just keep that in mind. So getting to that magic number of X number of listeners does not guarantee that that's going to turn into cash in your pocket. One thing to bear in mind here, that podcasting isn't a quick way to pay your bills. It's not as simple as just creating content and then waiting for people to pay you. Monetizing a podcast often requires a lot of hard work, marketing, and building a loyal audience first. I'm going to do it again. Monetizing a podcast often requires a lot of hard work, marketing, and building a loyal audience first. That's what you need to do before you even start thinking about how you can raise money to support your podcast. You got to put a lot of work in the background. So 4 podcasting myths that I want to challenge you to rethink. That podcasting is only for tech-savvy people? Nope. Podcasts are only for entertainment purposes? Nope. Creating a podcast is expensive? No. Can be, but no. And also, you need a big audience to make money from your podcast. Yes and no. The whole idea around having a show and having a podcast is about connection. And you can start building that right away by showing up for your audience, delivering your best content, being a great human being, and treating people with respect. In a world where we are subjected to so many voices, some of them have a hidden agenda to sell us something, to get us to be convinced to believe something. And then there's us. And it's interesting that podcasters are becoming more and more a trusted voice in a very noisy world. And your audience is showing up for you because they trust you. And they believe in what you're saying, and they believe that you're going to lead them in the right way. And I'm hoping you're getting that feeling from listening to the How to Podcast series because, again, you might notice I don't have any commercials. I'm not here telling you to do the thing, buy the thing, subscribe to the thing, and getting paid to tell you to do so, like some other shows. And it's because I'd rather put you first, to be honest. So I'm leaning away from making money from my podcast through sponsorship and promoting items and selling you products. I'd rather spend my time promoting other podcasters. So that's how I'm approaching it. And that's what's working for me. So if you're interested, you want to support this show, and again, here you go. I don't talk about this very often, but you can actually go to the link in the show notes into the website. There's a link there for my Buy Me a Coffee page. And there you can buy coffees in $5 increments. And I appreciate every single donation. There's also an option for you to book a time in my calendar for a one-on-one time together. It's 40 minutes together. And you and I will get together. You get a calendar link as part of that. And it's just you and I. We can talk about anything to do with podcasting. Whatever you need help with, you have my complete attention. There's no one else, just you and I. And you're not being shared in a room with a bunch of people. It's not recorded. It's not released as an episode. It's just you and I. So that's available too on the howtopodcast.ca website. And that's kind of how I use that money then to reinvest back into the podcast to make a better podcast for you and for those that listen. So thank you in advance. If you can do that, if you can help in any way, I appreciate it. So we got some more great episodes coming up for the month of November. It's NAPOD POMO, National Podcast Post Month. A podcast episode a day, every day for the month of November. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to jump now down to episode 161. I'm going to be recording that next and filling up the rest of the month and posting. So I hope you're enjoying a lot of Dave this month. I just want to say thank you again for all your support. Thank you for supporting our great co-hosts. Encourage you every time you listen to a co-hosted episode to go and follow, subscribe, listen to their podcasts, and give them some words of encouragement as a fellow family member here on the How to Podcast series. It would mean the world to them to hear your thoughts and your feedback on their show. And we really want to build a great community of support. And again, like I said at the beginning, if you would like to come on this show and share your podcast journey, ask your podcast questions, and give your podcast insight, I would love to have you as a guest co-host. howtopodcast.ca. Everything we talk about is there, and I truly appreciate you. Take care, keep podcasting, and catch you on the next episode. See you. Hey, it's Dave jumping on here at the end. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for listening to the How to Podcast series. Putting this out there for you. You're starting a podcast and you're like, Dave, the technology is giving me a headache. This editing thing is, I don't know, it's banana pants. I can't figure it all out. And you're thinking, if there was somebody who could help me with my podcast, I would pay them to do the editing for me. Guess what? I'm actually doing that. I have clients now, past guests who've been on the show, on one of my other podcasts, on this podcast. I'm doing some podcast consulting. I'm doing podcast editing. I'm helping with people launching their podcast, getting it, all the technology stuff, getting your podcast in all the players, helping you with your YouTube channel, your website. Oh, it just goes on and on. It goes on and on. And I would love to help you. So instead of going to Fiverr or Upwork, I've been on there. I keep trying to get on for jobs and nobody's paying attention to me. And I need attention. I would rather work with you as a listener of the show. So here's what I'm saying. Go to howtopodcast.ca, leave me a voice message, tell me what you need, and let's work out something that works for you and your budget. And if you need full service or you just need something quick like a drive-through type service, I'm there for you. I got you. And if you like what you hear on any of my 7 podcasts, I can do that for you. I can. And I'd love to work with you because you are amazing. And I'm there to help you, whatever you need. howtopodcast.ca. Reach out. Let me know what I can do to help you with your podcast. Thank you for listening. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.